Hey guys, it's me. Just doing a video today, documenting a few things. I found a channel on YouTube. I don't even know how I found it. Like it was like a hidden gem, and I must have had the right search. And I found this guy that seems to know all about this cult that I've been stalked by, and kind of how it all works. Gives details that on things that unless you've lived it, you don't really know these details. And I was able to, he was able to help me figure out um, a big piece of the mystery in my life. It seems like everything is being uncovered layer by layer by layer. And there was something about the divine king and the divine queen. Apparently, I always get references from this cult about being a goddess. They think I'm some kind of reincarnated Greek goddess of some sort. Now, I don't think this. Okay, this is not my thinking. I'm not like, buying into a lot of this stuff. And I realize it's archetypes. Okay, so and then like their queen, I've been called their queen, and all this other stuff. Well, now I'm coming to find out. I was thinking that maybe like it had to do with me having to be flipped over to their side through all the rapes and torture and all that stuff. And I thought maybe it had to do with the baby, because I know that whatever unholy child that they want me to carry, because apparently I have a DNA and abilities and all kinds of stuff that would apparently I can birth one of these things. The only problem is that I have the Holy Ghost within, and you can't have two spirits inside you like that. So I guess everything that they've done to me for the past 3 years, even beyond that, was to try to dehumanize me and turn me into something that I'm not. Obviously, I'm still me, thank God. But on this video, I'm going to play the audio of his YouTube video because I can't get screen sharing on here. So I'm going to play that, and you can hear about the Divine King and the Divine Queen. And basically, these are just two really strong, really good people that have been put through terror campaigns. And then, according to this coven, which is worldwide, we've been chosen. I was told back in 2013 that I was the chosen one. Now, I was a born-again Christian. I'm like, oh my God, what if I'm Mother Mary? Because they keep talking about a baby. Oh my God, I can't. Like, because you don't know. It's just insane. So I didn't understand. So and if you have the wrong people around you, which I did, it can lead to some really bad scenarios. So he kept saying that I was a chosen one, referred to me as Barbello. And apparently Barbello, and this guy would know, he wrote a book about Barbello and Lucifer and all that. And I learned a lot from this man, even though he was trying to lure me out to Ireland. He called me Barbello, which apparently with the Gnostics, it's the female Holy Spirit. I've been called this a few different times. Apparently it's now I don't think I'm the only one. I think that there's many that have been considered, but apparently we're exceptionally resilient, and they just want to take us down and ruin us. But it also has to do with our counterpart, which I recently found out that they had, I don't know if they murdered him or disappeared him. Now I understand why they went so hardcore to hide me away. It was much more difficult to hide him away because he was more public. And apparently he would be considered the sun god and born on around the date. So yeah, no, you're right, Patty. Oh, Patty, listen, I'm going to play this now. Yeah, I have it on tape that my handler talking about me having this special baby. I've been hunted for this baby since at least 2011, you know. But let me play this really quick, because you're stalked by the same people. Okay, so this is the Divine King and Queen, and this is by Eden versus John. He's a YouTuber, but I'm going to play this for you. Okay, it should play.
The next 3 Wiccan Sabbath days are called the 3 harvests. Okay. So the first of the harvests is Lammas, taking place on August the 1st. On this Wiccan Sabbath day, traditionally, if you want to read reports on the internet, it says it goes back to Celtic Ireland. The Wiccans must give thanks to the gods for the harvest of all their crops produced during the summer. And Wiccans say that they now have to give something up in return for the bounty they were given by the earth goddess. So for all the grain they got from the earth goddess, they now have to sacrifice something in return to it. So now that all the kings are dead, having been killed in the last ritual sacrifice called Midsummer, on Lammas, the Wiccan belief is that the divine king must also die. So I guess they have someone in mind who they may consider extra special, who they will ritually hack up and burn next. Or as Saban states on page 166, it is an old idea that in times of famine, the king, as the people's emissary, would be sacrificed in order to bring about the harvest. After all, if you want to appease the powers of nature, you don't want to give up a weak person, but the strongest. So my guess is that they will say that the divine king is someone who did not fall for any of the cult's games. And they have a lot of them, all designed to get the good guy to fail at something. Games to make the good guy look stupid or act childish, usually in public. There are games to get the good guy in trouble, get him to fail in business, get him in fights with his friends, get him in fights with his family. Games designed to get him to cheat on his wife and hook up with a cult member whore. Yet through it all, if this man is able to resist them, see through their games, and make the right choices, the cult will see that he is stronger. He is hard to manipulate and impossible to control. And because he's a real good guy and did everything the right way, this is the type of individual the pagan cult will consider as someone, as the divine king, who needs to be killed now, and really make it a point to go after next. And if they're able to kill him, I guess that the cannibalistic Wiccans will then cook him and eat him, because I found many references on the internet concerning eating the divine king figure in this ritual, and I quote a well-known encyclopedia on the internet. Wiccans mark this holiday by baking a figure of the god in bread and eating it to symbolize the sanctity and importance of the harvest. And in Wicca for Beginners, Saban writes on page 167, at Lammas, bread was sometimes baked into the shape of a man and then torn apart to symbolize the sacrifice of the divine king or his surrogate. So now this so-called man made of bread will have surrogates and will not only get eaten, but torn apart. So it sounds to me that they really hate this guy who is so cool. He is known as the divine king. And we can't forget what we practice in the Christian churches, which is eating bread or communion wafers that symbolize what? That would be the body of Christ or the divine king. Because Wicca is the religion of the inner group that goes on to control all the world's religions. And I truly doubt that someone like Christ got up and announced to all his friends that they should eat him when they were having dinner together. I would bet everything that this statement and this practice came strictly from the Wiccans and not from the original teachings of Christ. The next Wiccan Sabbath day is called Mabon, and this is the second of their so-called harvest festivals, taking place on September the 21st, which is the fall equinox. And the fall equinox is the same as a spring equinox. And all that means is that the day and the night are equal length. So again, to celebrate the Mabon holiday, they will have another death ritual. And I quote Sabin on page 168. Wiccans celebrate the fall equinox as the time when the goddess descends into the underworld, end quote. So now that the guy who was considered the divine king or the sun god has been killed by the cult, it is now time for the cult of Wiccans to go after his wife, the moon goddess, or the divine queen. So the big myth associated with this Wiccan holiday has to do with a Greek lady named Persephone, who according to the story was abducted by Hades, who is the Greek god of the underworld. And she is taken down into the underworld, which is like hell. So if you read explanations about Wicca that explain it as a nature-based religion that simply worships the seasons and cycles of death and birth, you now see exactly how they do that, by raping and killing people in religious style rituals. So, last spring equinox, as equals, the moon goddess and the sun god mated. Then the sun god died in the summer solstice. So now, at this next equinox, I guess the moon goddess must be made equal with the sun god again. And since the sun god is dead, the moon goddess must also die. So the Wiccans will target this woman next, most always involving large bonfires, it seems. Or they'll have a ritual designed that will terrify this woman. Large groups of people may rape her. And they'll say this will continue, all this torture and all this abuse, unless you give us your child.
3 years, I've been going.
Next is the Wiccan ritual of Samhain, known as Halloween now, that takes place on October the 31st. This is the last of the 3 harvest festivals and is a big Wiccan holiday. I believe Samhain is called the Wiccan New Year and is one of the 4 major Druidic seasonal festivals, along with Imbolc, Beltane, and Lammas. On Samhain, Wiccans believe that the spirits or demons could most easily get into the human world at this time. So of course the Wiccans had to do whatever the demons wanted, which was more rape, torture, and murder to please them. Okay. I quote Thea Sabin on page 171, quote, Samhain is another one of those nights when the Fae are said to change residence. And the Fae is a word that means witches, or those who have supernatural powers. So on Samhain, the cult of Wiccans are known to change residence. And if you wonder how this cult of useless cannibal retards are able to move into their new dream homes, it is not by being the best and working really hard, obviously. The witches will now kill everyone else in the area, especially those who had lands or houses or belongings that the coven wanted. So now that people like the divine king and the divine queen have been killed, now the witches will go after everyone else. So all of us regular good old people will get it next. So Wiccans will go house to house with masks, and these gangs would demand money, offerings, anything they wanted. Give us your kids, give us your wife. So to take over certain areas, the cult probably killed a lot of families this way. And then they were able to take over their houses, their land, farms, livestock, children, whatever they wanted. And Wiccans would call this changing residence, or taking over another community that real people had lived in for generations and worked really hard to build. And you can see that the U.S. military and the Vatican are doing the same exact thing today, all over America, in places like the Keene, New Hampshire area. And again, for video proof, see the playlist on this channel called Satanic Ritual Sacrifice Locations. And a video on that playlist that is a must-see is called Tent City. So that brings us back to Yule, where strong women will carry their children, give birth to their children, and go on to raise their children, no matter what the cult demands from them. So those are the 8 Sabbats. By hearing that, you may start to realize that Wiccans are not worshiping some beautiful Greek goddess with all of this. Yeah. They're actually killing those women who most resemble Greek goddesses, because abused and programmed cult people hate strong, intelligent, and beautiful real people. And all these rituals are about manipulation, rape, robbery, and murder, set up by a cult who has learned to attack one person or family at a time. So nobody else understands what is happening until it happens to them. So everyone needs to understand that Wiccans are not worshiping some mighty Celtic god by going after the strongest guy in the community, killing him, then raping his wife, and stealing their house and farmland. They are worshiping some demonic god, hell-bent on destroying the best of humanity while promoting the worst. So aside from that lie that Wiccans worship the gods and goddesses found in Celtic, Greek, and Norse mythology, let's talk about who the Wiccans are really worshiping.
Okay, so that was that video. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's almost like I've been groomed my whole life for this kind of a role. I'm not Greek, but I can read Greek. I speak Greek. I'm still up. I was engaged to someone who was Greek when I was young, and they didn't speak English in the house, so I kind of had to learn the language. And so it's really interesting how they want to kill the women or go after the women who resemble the Greek goddesses. And, I mean, at any time in my kitchen, you can hear music from there. And I cook like them. It's like every time I used to go to Greece, and I used to go for like a month and a half at a time, I felt like I was at home. And yeah. So, but now it makes sense how he mentioned that the man is done in the beginning of August and the woman is done in like the third week of September. What they do is they start what's called like a terror campaign. It has to do with ritual abuse. And mine always starts in like mid-March and then hits a crescendo in June, July for the solstice then. And then by the end of September, it usually ends. And then by December, I normally can, get a job and restart my life. And anything successful that I ever did was always begun in December. So like any apartments, but it was like before that, it was a struggle. So before it was like getting over the hill of the ritual, getting past it and then having success, and after it's over, like you won here, on for now, let's see how you do next year. It's kind of like the Hunger Games in a way, as I'm saying it out loud, so except there's not just one. But yeah, so this all makes sense. He mentioned something about the Divine King being born in the middle of, or like December 21st. But I know that they had taken one out and he was born December 22nd. And I don't necessarily know what time he was, so it could have been the 21st somewhere else in the world. So I don't know. But they took him out in July, and there's some mystery about where his body is. But now, they were talking about how they cannibalized the Sun King, and there is definitely a possibility that happened. I don't know. There's a lot of mystery around what happened to him. His body was not his, the one that they saw, and there was a lot of mystery. So what I think, because they didn't want him and I connecting, and they pretty much did everything they could to stop it. They even went in and erased all of my mail with him, any email correspondence that we had, and like everywhere, all my messages, posts, Skype, everything, specifically him. So I know that I was in Maine during that period of time, and trying to leave Maine was terrifying. It was one of the most terrifying ordeals ever. and it was about September, oh, end of September. And I know they were trying to hide me away at every location. So they definitely plan this stuff out. It is premeditated, and I guess I was told that if I didn't transgress, that I would be okay. You know, as long as you don't transgress, then they can't touch you. Um, yeah. So I don't know. But this guy's series are really interesting. I don't know if they want the Antichrist born in the flesh. I guess then I don't know. I'm not going to be its vessel, you know, to give birth to it. I'm not doing it. I have recordings of this. Um, you know, it's insane. So, but yeah, I found this. I wanted to play it. Anyone else who's cult stalked, um, we really are. We're the archetypes for these things: the divine king, the divine queen. There's a video before this one that he did called the Sabbats, and he talks about like their Sabbats and all that, and then he goes more into the divine king, the divine queen, and then the counterfeit earth goddess and um, sun god, all kinds of stuff. It's really kind of confusing because it's just ridiculous. It seems like one big stage play. So I guess when he said if they like Persephone was taken down to Tartarus with Hades against her will, which is pretty much what's happened with me. Um, and I've likened my situation to Persephone, where, you know, um, except my mother's not killing the earth because I'm not there. She's probably planting flowers and like, she's probably extremely happy. um, you know, checking like a little like turkey that's cooking if it's done yet. Am I dead yet? No, I'm not dead. Um, yeah, so I don't care. Um, but yeah, so basically it's so they keep the woman and they rape and torture her on a daily basis until she decides to give the cult her baby. And I've said the whole time I won't be having a baby, and anytime that I don't have that camera on, in the first 2 years they didn't let me sleep. And I had large groups of strangers, you know, coming and picking me up at night. Um, yeah, so really interesting. All this so people can maintain the nothing that they have, you know. For all the evil that's been done, I don't see any really, you know, monetary fruits of any of it. Not that I expect to see it, but like anyone around me, I don't see any of their monetary, um, you know, fruits. Like we're not the Windsors. I don't know. All right, well, I'm gonna go. All right, bye guys.